Okay. So give me a minute. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. What I'm gonna do also, I found that this worked last week. I'd spotlight myself for people who had a hard time like seeing me. So hopefully you can see my screen. I'm gonna log in here. You're in a call by yourself? Like also this call? I'm confused.
Zach, you're a confusing one, aren't you?
Yeah, like Zach, are you in 2 calls then? Like, do you think, did you join a call? Because if you like joined, let me see, did you join another meeting? I don't know how to get to my calendar from here. I can't remember how to do it. Because if you joined another meeting, then it'll show you that you're in a call by yourself. Okay. Well, hopefully, can you guys see my screen? I hope you guys can see my screen. We're just going to go from there. Go from here. Okay. So I'm going to refresh the page. All right. So hopefully this morning, obviously, you came on here and you would have seen our schedule for today. We've got our morning prayer. I wanted you to use the morning to work on your CCA. So the block A, work on your CCA. Do not forget your CCA is due the 25th of January because we have, including today, 7 days left together. So we have this week, Monday to Friday. That's okay. You're all right. We're just getting started, Sam. We have this week, Monday to Friday, and then we also have Monday, Tuesday next week together. So don't forget that. And then that's it. That's all we got left. So hopefully Monday, Tuesday next week that we're together are face-to-face. We are supposed to be getting, what's the date today? I think it's the 18th, right? Yeah, so in 2 days, the ministry, or sorry, yeah, the like our health unit and our government is going to release some more information about regarding like our school closures. So we'll find out on the 20th, basically, if we're going back on the 25th or if we're going to extend our virtual school. So fingers crossed, guys, that we are going to come back face to face. But in the event that we don't, we still have Monday, Tuesday together next week virtually, and your CCAs will be due in the Dropbox by 11:59 p.m. on the 25th. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You'll have obviously a day this week also to work on it, but make sure you're working on that CCA as much as possible. Okay, so I wanted you to work on CCA this morning, and then for our meeting today, we are starting our 3rd unit. So we have our first meeting, we are going to, normally if we were face-to-face, we would do a mind map. Like, you know, when I write, like, I would write social justice or just justice, sorry, on the board and then circle it. And then anything that came to mind, we would do like I would draw, but like write them on the board, right? What we normally do, like we did one for Jesus's love for us. We did one on qualities of love. Yeah, Lennon, there will be a test. You'll have another test this week. And I'll touch on Unit 2 test as well this morning, or at least some point today. So because we can't do our mind map face-to-face like we had, there's a whiteboard app on Teams, but it's really awful. So I'm not going to bother with it because I don't have like a touchpad with a pen. So it would just be horrible to write in. So instead, together we are going to watch this video. If it lags at all, like you can watch it on your own time as well. But we are going to watch this video together, and then hopefully you guys get a better idea about what our what the concept of justice means. What do you mean 2 CCAs? We don't have 2 CCAs or an exam. We have 1 CCA. We don't have an exam, but we will have a unit test. Like in your other class, you might have an exam, but if we stay online, it's possible then that the exam would be canceled. But I'm not sure. It's up to your teacher. So because we don't have an exam, we're just doing unit tests instead. But you'll survive. Because you got to multitask, Lennon. It's about multitasking. Because if you think about it, if we were face-to-face, we would have our unit tests, say Thursday, or it would open on Thursday, but if we were face-to-face, we would have our tests on Thursday. We'd have day for CCA on Friday, and then you'd have the weekend to go home, like which you still will, and work on your CCAs and get it all finished. Like the onus is on you to get your CCAs done, right? Like we give you class time, but especially being online, the onus is on you. I know, think about it. If Lennon, if you had 4 classes, like a normal semester, you would have 4 CCAs, possibly 4 exams. It is a lot easier, like work-wise. It's not nearly as much different work, I should say. Okay, so hopefully after this video, you guys will have a good idea about what the term justice means. And then we are going to take a note on natural law and social justice. So if you are writing it by hand, like I said, like we normally do in the chat, just make sure you give me a thumbs up or something so I know when you have the slide written down. So we're going to try and watch this. I'm going to turn my volume all the way up. And hopefully, you guys, it works for you and it doesn't lag too much.
If you were a praying mantis, it would be socially acceptable to devour your mate.
And if you're a honey badger, you have no regard for other animals. You don't care.
If you're a panda with twins, it's normal to abandon one to take care of the other.
But if humans do any of these things, we would call it wrong, unfair, or unjust.
Yeah, why is that? Why do humans care so much about justice?
Well, the Bible has a fascinating response to that question. On page 1, humans are set apart from all other creatures as the image of God.
Yeah, God's representatives who rule the world by his definition of good and evil.
And this identity, it's the bedrock of the Bible's view of justice. All humans are equal before God and have the right to be treated with dignity and fairness no matter who you are.
And that would be nice if we all did that. But we know how the world really works.
And the Bible addresses that too. It shows how we are constantly redefining good and evil to our own advantage at the expense of others.
Yeah, self-preservation. And the weaker someone is, the easier it is to take advantage of them.
And so in the biblical story, we see this happening on a personal level, but also in families, and then in communities, and in whole civilizations that create injustice, especially towards the vulnerable. But the story doesn't end there. Out of this whole mess, God chose a man named Abraham to start a new kind of family. Specifically, Abraham was to teach his family to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice.
If doing righteousness, that's a Bible word I don't really use, but what comes to mind is being a good person.
But what does that even mean, being good? The biblical Hebrew word for righteousness is tzedakah, and it's more specific. It's an ethical standard that refers to right relationships between people. It's about treating others as the image of God,
with the God-given dignity they deserve.
And this word justice, it's the Hebrew word mishpat. It can refer to retributive justice.
Like if I steal something, I pay the consequences.
Exactly. Yet most often in the Bible, mishpat refers to restorative justice. It means going a step further, actually seeking out vulnerable people who are being taken advantage of and helping them.
Yeah, some people call this charity.
But mishpat involves way more. It means taking steps to advocate for the vulnerable and changing social structures to prevent injustice.
So justice and righteousness are about a radical, selfless way of life.
Yeah, and you find this idea all over the Bible. Like here in the book of Proverbs, what does it mean to bring about just righteousness?
Open your mouth for those who can't speak for themselves.
And what do these words mean for the prophets, like Jeremiah?
Rescue the disadvantaged and don't tolerate oppression or violence against the immigrant, the orphan, and the widow.
And like here, look in the book of Psalms.
The Lord God upholds justice for the oppressed, gives food to the hungry, and sets the prisoner free. But he thwarts the way of the wicked. Whoa, he thwarts the wicked?
Yeah, in Hebrew, the word wicked is rasha. It means guilty or in the wrong. It refers to someone who mistreats another human, ignoring their dignity as an image of God.
So justice and righteousness is a big deal to God.
Yes, it's what Abraham's family, the Israelites, were to be all about. They ended up as immigrant slaves being oppressed unjustly in Egypt. And so God confronted Egypt's evil, declaring them to be rasha, guilty of injustice. And so he rescued Israel. But the tragic irony of the Old Testament story is that these redeemed people went on to commit the same acts of injustice against the vulnerable. And so God sent prophets who declared Israel guilty.
But they weren't the only ones. There's injustice everywhere.
Yeah, some people actively perpetrate injustice. Others receive benefits or privileges from unjust social structures they take for granted. And sadly, history has shown that when the oppressed gain power, they often become oppressors themselves.
So we all participate in injustice, actively or passively, even unintentionally. We're all the guilty ones.
And so this is the surprising message of the biblical story. God's response to humanity's legacy of injustice is to give us a gift, the life of Jesus. He did righteousness and justice, and yet he died on behalf of the guilty. But then God declared Jesus to be the righteous one when he rose from the dead. And so now Jesus offers his life to the guilty so that they too can be declared righteous before God, not because of anything they've done, but because of what Jesus did for them.
The earliest followers of Jesus experienced this righteousness from God, not just as a new status, but as a power that changed their lives and compelled them to act in surprising new ways.
Yeah, if God declared someone righteous when they didn't deserve it, the only reasonable response is to go and seek righteousness and justice for others.
This is a radical way of life, and it's not always convenient or easy. It's courageously making other people's problems my problems.
This is what Jesus meant by loving your neighbor as yourself. It's about a lifetime commitment fueled by the words of the ancient prophet Micah. God has told you, humans, what is good, and what the Lord requires of you is to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Hey, this is John and Tim from the Bible.
Okay. Sorry, guys, if that lagged at all for you. Like, usually I find, because I have the meeting open on my phone as well, like the sound is fine and the video just lags a little bit. So if that lagged a bit for you, please watch that on your own time so you can understand what the term justice means, right? So we think about, and we see justice in the Bible quite a bit, and you'll see that because you'll have a, a small summative assignment that you'll have to do this week about justice in the Bible. That being said, we're going to talk about in this unit this week the difference between justice and charity. So a lot of you guys are very familiar with charity, I'm sure, but a lot of people confuse justice with charity, and they're not the same thing. They're similar, but they're not the same thing. And so that video just talks about the fact that justice is, helping those. Well, it's either, there's two types, right? So there's either retribution, which is going to be to pay for the consequences when you do something bad. So if you do a type of injustice, like you steal from someone, and you get caught, you're going to either be charged or go to jail. So that would be, your punishment for being unjust. However, there's the main type of justice that we're talking about here, and that's talked about in the Bible, is the fact that we need to kind of speak up and help those that are more vulnerable than us, people that are less fortunate than us, whose human dignity is kind of at risk. So human dignity is one of the 7 Catholic social teachings, which we're going to talk about today. But human dignity is one that we are going to go into more detail about. There's 2 of the Catholic social teachings that you'll learn about today that we are going to focus on this week. One being human dignity, and then one being the preferential option for the poor. And so basically, any type of injustice that threatens somebody's human, God-given human dignity needs to be, stopped, basically. So we're going to take this note. It's called Natural Law and Social Justice. So if you guys are writing this by hand, make sure to let me know so that way I don't move too quickly. So in this unit called To Action, it's obviously about acting on things. So natural law, social justice, we learn about conformity, we'll learn about the preferential option for the poor. We will learn about obedience and what it means to obey and when shouldn't we obey. And then we also learn about prayer. So prayer is also a form of action, right? So we are looking at all the ways that we can kind of act on our values and beliefs. So hopefully you have this title down, Natural Law and Social Justice. Okay, so what is natural law? So it's a moral code that God wants humans to abide by. So I know that it has the word law in the title, and a lot of people automatically think like something that's against the law, right? Like stealing, murder, things like that. And that's not necessarily the case. So that those, kind of all fall into natural law, but there isn't an actual, you can't get charged for breaking, natural law. It doesn't really work that way. So it refers to a fundamental right and duty, basically, that God gave humans. So it's something that we are born with, right? So it's kind of our common sense, right? So according to St. Thomas Aquinas, all humans were born with the ability to understand the primary principles of natural law. So St. Paul, who is the saint that wrote, the majority of the letters in the Bible, in the New Testament, he taught the principles, natural law, that they are written in our hearts and in our minds. So like I said, it's our common sense. It's something that we're born with. We know basically what is right and what is wrong, just based on our experiences and being human. So it's a bit different. Like there's a lot of laws, all over the world that we need to learn about, right? So you might get charged for something that you didn't even realize was a law. And in that case, or like you can get a fine for something that you didn't realize was against the law. Even when it comes to driving, when you guys get your licenses, and you're learning how to drive, you'll realize how many things, like small things about driving, are actually against the law. Like you can't drive without shoes on. As silly as that sounds, that's against the law. You can't have, something in your window that obstructs your view or the view of, other drivers. That's against the law. So there's a lot of things that you'll realize, small things that are against the law, obviously not like massive things like driving without your shoes on. Sure, you probably get a warning, but you might get a ticket for it. Nothing like crazy huge, but there are a lot of laws that we have to learn as we live. Whereas natural law, think about it as, like I said, it's your common sense. It's things that are wrong versus what are right, basically from the day you're born. So if you're writing this slide by hand, just give me a thumbs up or something. Let me know in the chat if you are finished writing it and you're good to go. to the next slide?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay. Is anybody else writing it by hand? I know Brianna, usually Nathan, Chloe, Ava, you guys are usually writing it by hand. So let me know if you're good to move on. No, Nathan, you're not writing it by hand, or no, you're not good to go? Chloe's not writing it by hand. Nathan, are you writing it by hand? I'm confused by what your no means. Okay. All right. Oh, perfect. So Brianna and Ava, I know you guys are usually writing it by hand, so let me know if you're good to go. Ava printed it perfect. All right. I hope that it means we're all good to go. No one's writing it by hand. Okay, so here is an example from Hebrews chapter 10, line 16. It says, excuse me, this is the covenant I will make with them after that time, says the Lord. I will put my laws in their hearts and I will write them on their minds. So it just shows that we're talking about natural law here. When God created people and humans, it says the covenant. So it's the laws that, like I said, are common sense, just things that come naturally to us that we just know and understand based on our being human. Okay, so how do we respect natural law? So we can understand God's expectations for us through listening to our conscience, right? Our conscience is what we talked about last unit, forming our conscience, moral decision making. This all has everything to do with natural law. Oh, thank you, Brianna, for letting me know. So for example, when you're trying to foster a healthy and loving relationship, you have to look basically towards your conscience for guidance. Right? If you know that you always get that gut feeling. We talked about this last unit, that you get that gut feeling when you're about to do something wrong and you know that it's not right. So we're all rational beings. It's the one thing that separates us from, plants and animals, that we are able to rationalize. We can think our situations through. We know, pros and cons, and we don't just act. We can use our ability to reason to comprehend God's goals for us. All right, so the fact that we can rationalize and we can reason with ourselves and with other people, that is usually the first steps into listening to our conscience. So natural law and justice. So justice is an important virtue. So we talked about virtues unit 1, right? We talked about faith, hope, and love as the 3 most common virtues. Justice is also a virtue. Remember, a virtue meaning a good habit. So justice obviously works hand in hand with natural law. So we know that it's wrong to oppress people. We know that it's wrong to not help the most vulnerable people in our communities. So that's why that would be justice, right? Helping those people, advocating for them. And that just falls under natural law because it's something that we just know based on our conscience and our common sense that it's not right. So justice involves striving to ensure the well-being of others as well as ourselves. And when we work towards justice, we're respecting the natural law that God established. So although we have knowledge of God's laws, we need to nurture our ability to identify and seek justice. Okay, so just because you know what's right and wrong doesn't mean that you will just naturally go out and be an advocate for those who are, most vulnerable. So like I said earlier, a lot of people get justice and charity confused, and they are different. They go hand in hand, but they're different. So we already know there is a difference between the two, but I want you guys to try and figure out what is that difference. So try and write in the chat. Let me know what you think might be the difference between justice and charity. So think about your idea of what charity is, and then what you just learned about what justice means. And then write in the chat, if you can, what you think the difference is.
I'm gonna say I am writing it out.
What's that?
I'm writing it out.
Okay. Wakey, wakey, guys. What do you think that difference is? If you know now that justice is not just helping people less fortunate, but advocating for them and making some real changes to help, help them in the long run, then what do you think charity is? So how does that differ from what justice would be? I'm just gonna go back because Mason, you said you were writing it by hand. So did you get this slide down? Because that was the first Hebrews one. And then did you get this one down?
Yeah, I did get all those down.
Okay. So you're good to
I
be
was
here?
just saying.
Okay, I'll slow down. All right. So make sure you guys write these down. You don't need to have all the examples, that are right here, like on the slide, but make sure you get a couple down so that way you know the difference. So if you think about justice and charity, think about like if you drew a picture of a tree, or if you looked at a tree. All right. So if you're looking at a tree, you see like from the ground up, right? So you see the trunk of the tree, you see the branches, you see the leaves, but you don't see the roots underneath, right? Those are underground. You know they're there, but you can't see them. So think about justice as justice is the roots. So justice is the stuff that we can't, necessarily see. Whereas charity would be, the tree, the part of the tree that we can see. So charity, it's like a band-aid to a problem, right? So you can help something that you can see firsthand. But justice is getting to the root of the problem, right? Getting to the, really solving that problem. So that way, the chances of it happening or continuing to happen, are drastically decreased. So charitable work, so that's charity. So they meet basic needs and in the aid individuals. So for example, you could volunteer at a homeless shelter. You are not solving the issue of homelessness, but you're helping, right? You're volunteering your time at a homeless shelter. So that's a work of, it's a charitable work. You could tutor children. You could participate in a community beautification program, so like by planting trees and cleaning up garbage. You could donate to food pantries and clothing closets. You could sponsor a refugee family. You could raise money for an overseas development project. There's lots of different things that you can do that are considered charity. So you're helping, but you're not getting to the root of the issue. Whereas social justice then, that will remove the root cause and it'll improve the structures. Okay, so for example, not just volunteering at a homeless shelter, but maybe expanding access to affordable housing. So if somebody like a contractor buys like a chunk of land, and then they build a bunch of affordable housing units on that land, and maybe it's in an area that homelessness is very prominent. So then that would be expanding access to affordable housing, right? So then that would help to get to the root of the problem and help to eliminate that issue of homelessness. So you can work to improve the education system. So maybe we know that our education system or our curriculum is flawed. Maybe we know that it's not working, but there's nothing much we can do about it. And then a group of people get together and then they rewrite the curriculum, which happened a couple years ago already, or a few years ago. They rewrite the curriculum and they change the way our education system works. That is getting to the root of the issue. So you can extend legal protection to unborn children. You can support environmental protection laws, participate in a living wage campaign, promote peace and advocate for international assistance. So you can see these are obviously big things. These are not something that you guys are going to be able to tackle, especially being teenagers and on your own individually. It's very difficult for any one person to tackle any of these social justice issues. But hopefully you can see the difference between basically like providing an immediate aid or immediate assistance, just helping, and then versus actually getting to the root of the problem and helping to eliminate that so the problem doesn't happen again. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll give you guys a minute to write some of these down. You guys must be sleepy this morning.
I think I might need a coffee or something.
I know, I feel like all of you guys do. Everyone's so quiet. All right, are we good to move to the next slide?
Yeah, you're good.
Awesome. Okay, so this is just diving into what charity is a little bit more. So charity is a social service. Okay, so a scriptural reference, something that you guys have learned already so that you can make sense of it, is the Good Samaritan story. So remember we learned about the Good Samaritan story in the Bible. So that story, it doesn't attempt to obviously survey the cause of highway banditry, right? In the story, there's no immediate, there's no, later actions to make sure that that doesn't happen to anybody again. The Samaritan provided temporary and immediate relief to the Jewish person that was robbed and left for dead. So charity includes private and immediate acts. It responds to immediate need. It provides, I should say, direct service, which is food, clothing, and shelter, for example. It requires repeated action because it's not getting to the root of the issue, so that the problem is still going to be there. So it requires repeated action because it's not solved. And it's directed at the effects of injustice, right? So basically, we provide charity where there is injustice. Obviously, it's not very simple sometimes to just solve the issue of justice that we are needing the charity for. So it takes a long time, and sometimes it never gets solved, unfortunately. So for example, there's homeless shelters, food shelves, clothing drives, emergency services. So like, unfortunately, like policing can be seen as like charitable works, right? So you don't pay to have the police come and help you out, right? So they are seen as a charitable service because, of course, they are, fighting crime and they're keeping people safe and they're helping. But it still doesn't get to the root of the problem. There's still going to be issues that we need, the police's help for. And Lennon, hopefully you are seeing that we're not learning the same stuff as other units. Last unit was all about love. So we are, hopefully you're able to see the connection between the concepts, but it's new material. There will be a little bit of overlap with regards to legitimate authority and common good in this unit, because but all you learned about that, or those terms basically last unit, were their definitions. So we dive into them into a bit more detail in this unit. So I'll give you a second. Hopefully you have this written down. Mason, let me know when you're good to move on.
I'm good.
You're fast. All right. So then justice. Justice is a social change, right? So think about charity as a social service, justice as a social change. So a scriptural reference for this would be the Exodus story. So in the Exodus story, it's about Moses. He doesn't ask for food and medicine for the Jewish slave labor force. He challenges the institutional system. So you know the famous quote, "Let my people go." So he's fighting. Moses fights for the change in the institutional system. He's not just trying to help the people that are being harmed. So justice includes public collective actions. It responds to long-term need. It promotes social change in institutions. It revolves in structural injustice, and it's directed at the root cause of social injustice. So like I said, think about that tree diagram. So charity is the stuff you can see on the surface, and then justice would be the roots underneath, the things that you can't necessarily see and that are hard to get to. So for example, you have legislative advocacy. You can change corporate policies or practices. So it's not just if one person, say there's a, corporation that is the majority of its workers are men and then a woman gets hired. They're going to have to change some of their policies or practices in order to be able to make it fair for that female employee. Congregation-based community organizing. So you'll see like they're bigger tasks that are not necessarily feasible for one person to tackle. So it's really hard for just one person to bring about social change. Not necessarily impossible. Obviously, it just takes one person to kind of start a movement, and then more people will join in and help. But it is difficult for one person alone to just actually eliminate injustice. Okay, Mason.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay, perfect. You read my mind. Okay, so like I said, we are going to be learning about these 7 Catholic social teachings. So make sure you star or underline or highlight this definition here because you'll see it on your test review, which you will get tomorrow. So what are the Catholic social teachings? So they are basically, by definition, quote unquote, a rich treasure of wisdom about building a just society and living lives of holiness amidst the challenges of modern society. So it's basically a list of things that, people need to try to keep fair, basically. You'll see what I mean when you see them. The Catholic Church recognizes that the 7 social teachings, and we're called basically to work towards respecting and implementing these teachings in our society. So we need to respect them in order for everybody to be treated fairly. And not, so you don't get fair and equal confused, because equal is not always better, right? So obviously we want to have equal rights. We want to have, if we can, equal pay when it comes to men and women. However, equality is not always the same as equity. So equity means fairness. And so what might work for one person, might not work for the next. So we have to take that into consideration, right? So we would be setting up people for a loss. So think about like in the school system specifically. So we have tests. In almost every class you'll have a test. So testing is not always, running quietly, by memory might work for a few people, but it doesn't necessarily work for everyone. So that's why, I give you guys test reviews. That's why we have areas in our school that are quieter or that have assistants there if need be. So the one thing doesn't always work for everybody, and that's the difference between equity and equality. So if we were strictly focused on equality, it would be about everything being equal. But we focus more on equity, which is about fairness and what people need. And people need individual and unique things in order to succeed. And we have to accommodate that. And so you'll see when we look at the 7 social teachings that it's a list of things that we need to respect and we need to implement in order to have a equitable society. So you see what I mean? So these are the 7 teachings, right? So you've got human dignity, which is one of the things that we're focusing on. Stewardship, preferential option for the poor, which is another thing we're focusing on this unit. Common good, which you've learned about already. So it's about every member of the community or society being able to live up to their full potential. Dignity of work and rights of workers, rights and responsibilities in general. We're going to be learning about rights as well in our reading or later on today. And then call to family, community, and participation. So you need to know what these 7 social teachings are just by list, but there are basically 3 or 4 that we are going to dive into in more detail in this unit. So Mason, let me know when you're good to go.
I'm good.
Perfect. So like I said, I already told you guys in this unit, we're going to focus mostly on human dignity and preferential option for the poor. They can really show us those 2 concepts or 2 social teachings are going to show us really how to love God and love our neighbor. So for example, human dignity. So the church calls us to remember the principle of human dignity, and it teaches us that every life has dignity from the moment of conception until death. So remember, this is why God came to earth as an unborn child, right? Because we learned about this already. He came to show that every stage of life, no matter what stage you're in, your life has value. So that's the same as the second that you're conceived, you have the right of human dignity, right? So you are able to, you're a dignified human. So every life is then valuable and should be respected. We're called to make an extra effort to respect the dignity of the poor. So think about the poor. The poor, they are extremely vulnerable. So they are stripped of their basic survival needs sometimes. And that can really take a toll on your dignity as a human. So if we aren't respecting people that are more, that are vulnerable in our communities, then we are not respecting their dignity as humans. So in the next slide, there is a video, but I'm not going to show it because we won't have enough time in our meeting. But it's a video that if you need more help understanding the concept of human dignity, that I want you guys to watch. It's from a show. Like it used to be like a dramatized, scenario show where it was like all about it was all about social experiments and how the public react to certain situations. So they have like some hired actors and actresses. They had one person hired pretending to be a homeless guy, sitting there on it's like the boardwalk in, I think it's, I don't know if it's like New Jersey or somewhere by the beach, in the States. And then they had 3 kids like that were hired actors to come and basically disrespect the homeless person and show that they have no respect for his human dignity, right? So they were like trying to make him do tricks and do things for $1 for his money to see how the public would react. And so, like I said, because we have natural law, we have common sense, and we have a conscience, and those are just instilled in us when we're born. And so we know that disrespecting the dignity of a human or another human being is not right, regardless of their situation. So just because this person was homeless, the public that were not paid actors would come and give these kids crap for doing this and get them in trouble because it's not right. And they say a lot of the people in this video in the public will say that's not right. How would you like it if you were in the situation, or you don't know this man's life, you don't know what brought him to this moment. And so it just shows that we naturally don't stand for people that are disrespecting human dignity. So if you get a chance to watch that video, it can be a little bit corny, but it's good and it's very insightful, and you can kind of put yourself in their shoes and think about what you would do if you saw something like that happening.
I've actually seen a video. It's kind of like the same thing. There wasn't kids. It was just a guy and then a girl dressed up homeless, and then just kind of asking for help, and then they never got it. But when the guy went dressed up in a suit and tie, literally 2 seconds later, he got help. And people were asking him "Are you okay?"
I know. So it's all about social experiments, right? So it's why are we more apt to help someone that seems like that looks more presentable in our eyes than someone that looks like they're poor or more vulnerable, right? So you got to think about that in that case. But yeah, this is a what would you do video. Like I said, so they have paid actors pretending to be teens, harassing and disrespecting the human dignity of this homeless man, and then you can see how the public reacts to it. So what goes hand in hand with human dignity is community. So human dignity can only be, realized and protected in community. So in our community, meaning a group of people. So in our teaching, the human person is not only sacred, but also social. So meaning in our Catholic teachings, right? We're not just sacred beings, we're social beings. You're social from the moment you're born. You're communicating with people to say what you want, even when you're born, you're crying to get things that you need or to get things that you want. And that's your way of communicating and being social. So how we organize our society. So for example, with regards to economics, so job distribution and politics, in law and policy, that will directly affect human dignity and the capacity of individuals to grow in the community. So if we have laws in place or policies in place where it's next to impossible, to get a job or to move up in the world, we're going to have people in our community that are not able to grow and not able to thrive and reach their full potential. So that is not that's not supporting common good. So community and human dignity go hand in hand.
You can move on if you want. I'm done.
Oh, perfect. So next social teaching that we're looking at is the preferential option for the poor. So Jesus tells us that solidarity with the poor is solidarity with God. So as you did it to the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me. So that's an example from Matthew chapter 25, line 40. So he's basically saying if you disrespect members of the of his family, so of your community, who are says the least of these, meaning the most vulnerable or the lesser of them, then you also are disrespecting God. So God's special closeness with the poor is known as the preferential option for the poor. So the rich people, rich or wealthy people do not share this closeness that God has with the poor. It's because basically poor people, they need God. That's their immediate reaction, is that they don't have those basic survival needs, and so they need God, and so God has a special closeness and is in solidarity with the poor, whereas wealthy people, they have all access to their basic survival needs all the time, so they don't necessarily they don't need God on the same level. I hope that makes sense. So we'll dive into this concept a little bit more in a minute. Sorry, guys.
I've got one question I've been wondering.
Mm-hmm.
Is your like boyfriend part of like a K9 unit?
No. No, he's
I know,
not.
it just seems that.
I know. Well, Knox is he's a king shepherd. So actually, like canine units, they will use German shepherds, which are significantly smaller. Yes, Devin.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just wondering that because it seems like that would be a reasonable thing.
Right. Yeah, you're right. It would be. Yeah, Knox is way too big to be a canine dog. And Devin, you will tomorrow. Okay, so moving on quickly. Just to dive in a little bit more on what the preferential option for the poor is. So basically, as followers of Christ, we're challenged to make a fundamental option for the poor, which basically means to speak for the voiceless. So you need to advocate for people who are less fortunate than you. You have to defend the defenseless and assess the lifestyles, policies, and social institutions in terms of their impact on the poor. So the poor or the vulnerable, they can't make changes usually for themselves on a larger scale. So it's people that are more wealthy or less vulnerable that need to advocate for them. So the option for the poor, it doesn't mean pitting one group against another. It doesn't necessarily say like we need to differentiate and divide the community, but rather it strengthens the community as a whole because it's assisting those who are most vulnerable. So just because they're the most vulnerable, they live on the outskirts of the community, that doesn't mean that they are not part of the community, and they should still be respected as such. So as Christians, we're called to respond to the needs of all of our brothers and sisters, but obviously those with the greatest need require the greatest response. So if you're wanting to donate to somebody and you have $20, the chances of you giving your $20 to someone who is wealthy and works full time versus maybe your $20 to someone who maybe just lost their job and is having a hard time providing for their family, that's going to be, there's going to be a high chance that you're going to give it to the latter. And I apologize in advance, guys. We're probably going to run a little bit past, not much, but a little bit past our 11 o'clock timeline, just to get this note done. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit after the note about your test, how to get you can look at your scores, etc. And Mason, just let me know when we're good to go.
You're good to go.
Perfect. So this is just a quote from a priest, Father Dan Berrien. So he said, "The poor shows us who we are, and the prophets tell us who we could be. So we hide the poor and kill the prophets." It's a little food for thought. We're not going to watch this, but basically Mother Teresa is like our role model for this preferential option for the poor concept, right? So she dedicated her life, like her entire life, to helping the poor. Sam, your Unit 3 test will open likely on Thursday, and then it will be open until sometime on the weekend, probably. So that way I can have it open for at least 48 hours for you guys. But yes, like I said, Mother Teresa dedicated her life to helping the poor. She did tons of charitable and justice works in order to help the most vulnerable people in not just her community. She traveled all over the world. So in all these people all over the world. wanted to ask you, how can you respect human dignity and the poor in your community? So that's just something for you guys to kind of ponder. That being said, I'm going to pull up our D2L page here for a minute. So this afternoon, or after our first meeting here, what I want you guys to do is you're going to download this handout called Justice Scriptural Links. So if you click it, it will automatically download for you. So open it up. Oh, give that a second. That's going to be your Unit 3 test review. Click Enable Editing. Excuse me. And you can work on it right here. So it's not very long. It's only 4 readings with a couple questions in each. So what you're going to do is you're going to read the following scripture passages, and they're not long passages, and answer the questions. So I want you guys to submit this when you're done to the Dropbox on D2L. So make sure you, like I said, you can type your answers right in here. Excuse me, save it, and then upload it to the Dropbox. So I know you guys don't have your Bibles, and the chances of you having a Bible at home might be pretty slim. So you can access Bible passages on this website. So if you copy and paste this, you can go to Bible Gateway. I'm not going to paste it because it's literally right here, but like if I pasted it, it would just load this. And then you can type in, so for example, the first passage is John 13, 1 through 17. So if I type in John 13, 1 to 17, it'll be right here. So it'll tell you chapter 13, and it will just show you the lines that you need. So you can read them here. So you can literally type in anything, like, and it will be up here. Like I could type in John 6, 1 through 5, and it would be right here. So the Bible Gateway is a website, like I said, that's going to let you look up all of these passages. So read the passages and then answer the questions. So for example, the first one, it's going to ask you to put the basic meaning of the reading into your own words. So we have 1 mark. So what is it? What is the reading actually saying? So summarize it in your own words. And then based on the passage, it's going to tell you in that passage 3 ways that you can serve others. So make sure you don't just come up with these off the top of your head. They're from the passage. Or you might get, let me see. So 3 ways you can serve others. Let's see. John, what was it? 13, 1 through 17. Is that it? Yes. So it will give you an idea in this passage of ways that you can serve others. Let me see. This one you might have to read between the lines and come up with some on your own. Yeah, so sorry. For this one, 3 ways that you can serve others. That one you can have on your own opinion. It's this one, the 4 practices that just people will do, that comes right from the reading. So I apologize. Yeah, 3 ways you can serve others. You can get ideas from the reading, but that one I'm okay with you coming up with them off the top of your head. But 4 practices that just people do, this is going to be from the reading. So if you go to the Bible Gateway, you'll see it's right here. And it talks about, there's different things that there's 4 different things to do, right? So to free the oppressed, you talk about sharing your food, clothing the naked, so on and so forth. So there's different ways, there's 4 different things it talks about in that passage. Zach, it'll be Friday. Okay, so you've got 4 passages to read and some questions to answer for each. So like I said, type your answers right on here, save it, and then upload it to our Dropbox. So you can scroll up to the top, go to the Dropbox. This is going to look a little bit different for you guys, like I said, because I have more options on here. But you will be able to see right here, Justice Scriptural Links. You can click on it and upload your thing. Everything's worth marks, Zach. So after you are done working on that, we'll have our second meeting. We're going to just go over a reading that we have to do. And then we'll talk a little bit more. But also, if you're wondering, you can go to quizzes and see your marks on your tests from Unit 2. So I've marked them already. So you can click on them. I'm not going to click on it because it's going to show everybody's grades, but you can click on it. I don't know, let me see. how to view this like you. I don't know how to look at it so that way. Oh, maybe here. Yeah, so I'm going to do a view as a student for a second. So if I view this as you guys, this is what you see. Okay, so I need to, or what if you go to grades? No, okay, so I need to make sure that you guys can see your quizzes. If you guys, let me see. What do you mean, where do you click? I'm gonna go back to not viewing as a student. So if one of you guys are on D12 right now, can you tell me if you can see? I might not be able to see it just because I didn't take the quiz. Like, can you tell me if you can see your quiz mark? No? Okay. I'm going to try and edit it so I can see. I want you guys to be able to see your mark, but I'm trying to figure out how to do that. Maybe assessment. Oh, I think it's under submission views. Hang on. I think I did this before. Sure. Okay, now see if you can see it. Oh, hang on. I had to save and close. Can you see it now? Sorry, I had to click save. Refresh your page and see if you can see the test. Can anybody see it? Still no. I don't know how to do this. Let me see. Oh, what's that? Might be under restrictions. Sorry, guys. I don't know how to work this very well. Okay. Well, I will try my best to figure this out. I'm going to let you guys go so that way you can work on your Justice Scriptural Links stuff. And then we will come back together and hopefully I'll have this figured out by the time we meet again for our second meeting. So give me a minute here just to download our attendance list. I'm going to quit sharing my screen. But yeah, okay. So you guys go ahead. I will meet back here at, like I said, at 12:20, and hopefully I'll have the test thing figured out. I'll Google some tutorials and see how to make it so that way you guys can see your marks. And we'll go from there. But yes, I will see you guys at 12:20.